Welcome back to Coffee and Tea with CarrieVee. I'm CarrieVee, your biggest fan, the person who will believe in you even when you can't believe in yourself. Coffee and Tea with CarrieVee is all things leadership, communication, confidence, clarity, and life. And I am so excited that today we have Madeline Claire Weiss with us. Again, it's been a little while. It's been a hot minute
It
since
has.
you've been on the show, Madeline, and it's so wonderful to have you back. So
It is wonderful to be here.
thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Oh my gosh. And it's been fun. So we've been chatting for a few minutes, catching up here, and we were just like, we should have recorded all that. It was deep. It was really deep. So Madeline, what is setting you on fire? Tell us about your new book. I'm just so excited to have you here. So I'm going to zip it and let you take over.
So, yeah. So this is the new baby.
Yes, I love it.
There we
What's
go.
your
I'm trying
story?
to get it straight. There we go. How that happened was so many of my clients would say to me, how come no one ever told me anything about how my mind worked? How come no one ever told me that the mind makes up stories for us to live in and we think they're true? And to know that is to be able to make up a better story once you know you're doing that anyway. And no one ever told me that. And it would have helped because had I known that, by the time they come to me, they've hit the wall a few times
Yes.
and have potentially made themselves and other people not so happy.
Yes.
And had they known, it might have been better. So I thought they're so right. I could speak from my own experience. Carrie, you know that my father died when I was 15 years old, and that had a pretty important life-shaping impact. So I too wished that someone had engaged with me on that level and straightened out that little story I was telling myself about what happened, which was not true and not helpful to me. So I figured, okay, fine, somebody's going to do this, and it's going to be me.
Yes.
And I looked, I saw there are other mindfulness books and other activity books, but I didn't see anything sort of brain science watered down in a workbook kind of a thing. And so that's what I did.
I love this. I love it. And we've been discussing the book a little bit. What are some key points for children? And the title of the book again, like say it out loud. So if people are just listening, they can get it too.
So the book is What's Your Story? Building Your Best Adventures in School and Life. It's a personal development workbook for kids.
Yes.
I have a little video clip of my granddaughter, Gabby, was my consultant. She's turning 8 in a few days. And I turned the camera on and said, Gabby, if this hadn't been our book and you just saw it on a bookshelf, what would you say? And she would say, I have to read this book. She said, I just loved, and then she got stuck. And I remembered that she lit up when she saw it in print and she read the table of contents. And she said to me, every word, because there's a whole lot in here about the book is segmented into Once Upon a Time, and the second part is Happily Ever After. So there's a lot in here about the magic of happiness in the second part and how we define happiness. And it's not necessarily what I was going to say kids think. I don't think adults necessarily get it that well either. And that's, some of the work I do with them. But the first part is more about stories and how stories got started. And we talk about people sitting around in the caves many, many years ago by the fire, telling their stories. And then how the mind is a story making machine. And then what even makes a great story. once you realize you're making stories and that becomes your life,
Yeah.
how do you make a great story? And I based that on the hero's journey. And then there are all these exercises. So anyway, I'm in love.
I love it. I have said, I am one of those people who have said, why weren't we taught this in grade school, in junior high? Why weren't we given this kind of training? I mean, school's great. I loved school. I was one of those crazy kids that loved the end of summer because we got to go back to school. I love studying. I still do. But I didn't tap into personal development until I was well into my late 30s, early 40s.
Right.
Well,
And you know, there's some controversy about it now, because there are those who understandably think that SEL, social emotional learning,
yes.
Is too big, and reading, writing, arithmetic is not big enough. So all of those personal development things that we were thinking was a great idea, to bring that to the kids, and then you see that their math scores are some of the lowest on the, like, in the rankings of other countries,
Right.
and that sort of thing. So what I took that seriously. And so this in January is going to be an after school program that we're piloting for a select group of
Wow.
10 kids. And I have a parenting supplement that goes with the book, and I have a educator's supplement that people can get their hands on also. But the idea is, it's important enough to do it, but not in a way that crowds out other things that are really important also.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not either or.
Yes. And it never had to be either or. It's
Right.
And. It's all.
Well, when I was 15, and my father died suddenly of a stroke. So I was a very mouthy little girl. Well, it's not even just mouthy. I remember in kindergarten, like I got in trouble the first day of kindergarten because there was a tricycle and I got on it and rode out of the classroom down the hallways.
I can see that. I can see that.
So that's the kind of kid I was.
Uh-huh.
And I was always in trouble for talking back. They called it talking back, or they said you were fresh or whatever. And because of all of that, when he died and no one was talking to me about anything, I just figured it was my fault. Like that I stressed him to death. And that went on for years. You know, I don't think that would happen now. I think now somebody would have tried to tap into what my experience was and what was going on in my head about this traumatic event in the life of my family.
Yeah.
But back then and there, they didn't.
No.
In my part of the world. So I was walking around with that story for years.
Wow.
Yeah. Until this day at the cemetery, and I broke down with my mother and about how all my fault it was. And she said, "No, honey, it wasn't you. It was work." And I didn't know that because they weren't talking to me about his work.
And how long was that after your dad died that happened?
Carrie, I think that was years, because when I picture myself with my mother, I'm not short. Well, I mean, I'm still short, but I mean, I wasn't like little kid short.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think that went on for years.
That's just so.
And there's still a part of me, by the way, you should know, who thinks it didn't help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry that.
Yeah. So now I feel like if I can help one little boy or girl's mommy or daddy or anybody at all, for that matter, live that happier, healthier, prosperous, and productive life.
Yeah.
They may not even know they can have, but I do, because I see it over and over again now. where clients go from meh, you know, to having a really great life.
Yes. So in the book, then, I know that you shared with me there's a lot of writing and journaling and exercises in there to help you walk through things. What are some of them? Like, where do we start in the book? Where does it start? And I know it starts, and then we end with happily ever after. But what are some of those writing exercises? What are some of the things that you are helping young people work through?
So I separated those into inside relationship stories and outside relationship stories.
Okay.
The inside is the mindset piece. It's how you relate to yourself.
Okay.
And what the way I've framed it for the kids is that they put together this kind of superpower team with their brain.
Ooh, I love that.
That's Brainy. It says, "Hi, I'm Brainy and I will be your guide."
I love brainy.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why I call it on the inside, because both are so important. The external relationships with family and friends and teachers and neighbors and are so important to our development and our well-being. And also, just as much, if not more, how we get along with ourselves, how we talk to ourselves, what kind of relationship we have with ourselves.
Yes.
Which is what so many people come to, either coaching or therapy, and that's really what they're working on.
Yeah.
So why not learn about that when you're 8? So I teach them, there's polyvagal breathing, which is like kind of a big word, and I have it on my website. There's a tab that says Power Breathe, and I like to call it that because it's so empowering.
Yes.
And it's a 30-second mindset reset.
Yes.
So I call it something else for the kids, but I teach them how to do that. So before they do any of these exercises, they first reset their minds.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That is beautiful. So how do you teach that breathing? Like if someone was going to tap into that, what are our steps? And what is your website so we can lead people there?
Yeah, that's MadeleineWeiss.com.
That's easy. And I'll link it too.
Okay. So I call it the ATM way. And
Okay.
then I say, and no, this doesn't have anything to do with money. Ha, ha, ha. All right. So it's acknowledge your emotions. The first step is to just notice that you're feeling something.
Okay.
Notice in your body. I'm going to say this to you, Carrie, and you're going to know that you've heard this so many times before, because this is what we help adults to do.
Yes.
And the idea here is to frame it so the kids can learn it. Why shouldn't they? Why shouldn't they know this when they're 8? Okay.
Yes.
Right. So they acknowledge their emotions by noticing what's in their body. And then I call it teaming up with your brain. And that's where you use your breath because Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain.
Yeah.
He talks about how when the mid portion of the brain, the more emotional part, is flailing around, is like overexcited, then it knocks the higher brain offline.
Wow.
So you can't think straight. So the idea of the breathing is it's going to get a little technical. It stimulates the polyvagal nerve, which takes you from your sympathetic nervous system activation to your parasympathetic, which is calming and clearing.
Okay.
So that means the brain is reintegrated, like each part can talk to the other part. So that's why I say it's like a team,
Yeah.
So the lower brain centers and the higher. So when something is happening and there's this excitement, this mid part of the brain can say there's something going on here. I don't know. I don't know. And then the higher brain says, thank you for sharing. I got it from here. And by the way, people seem to think that it's better to operate with your logic and not your emotion. And I just want to be really, really, really clear that's not true. That there are many, many studies of frontal brain injury
Mm-hmm.
where the higher centers and the lower emotional centers are not connected. And people can't make a decision to save their life because the different parts of the brain are not working as a team. They're not communicating with each other.
Yes.
So I've had adult clients say to me, I was always told that you're not supposed to be emotional when you're making a decision. And I said, the emotions don't drive the bus. They
Yeah.
don't make the decision, but you can't make a decision without them. There's this wonderful example of a physician who had one of these higher brain injuries, prefrontal cortex injury,
Yeah.
and he couldn't get dressed in the morning. So because he'd lay out all different pairs of pants, and he couldn't experience a preference. So he'd just stand there staring at them.
Wow.
He didn't know how he felt because he couldn't feel something and send that data to the higher brain center to make a decision. So he was like stuck.
Wow.
And there are other scientific studies about people who simulated some business decision making.
Yeah.
And for the same reason, they all went bankrupt because they didn't have any emotional data as guideposts, like, don't go there, that's going to feel really bad.
Yeah.
So anyway, so first they acknowledge the emotions, and then they team that up with the higher brain through this little breathing exercise that we teach them how to do. And then they make a plan. So it's acknowledge, team, and make ATM, make the plan for what comes next. And that moves them right into creating the story. And the story is broken down into what's happening, like
Mm-hmm.
what's happening right now, what's possible,
Mm.
what are the options, what's next, what is the action, and then how does that in their visioning get resolved in a way that's happily ever after. So,
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it.
and I didn't want them to be like overwhelmed looking at blank pages and a writing assignment or anything like that. So I put an appendix in that has an example. So, like for every scenario,
Yeah.
there's actually one written out as an example. So
What a
they
great
could,
idea.
yeah. So they actually don't even need to do the exercise. People can use it however they like.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
So
when you take this in, when you take this into the schools in January and walk this beta group through, what is your main goal for that group, for that, or main goals?
I actually want to see what the response is to this approach. And if it goes as well as I hope it might, then I think it wouldn't hurt to test it somehow with a pre-test and a post-test on their sense of self and well-being.
Yes.
Some measures for that I would have educators designing, and then maybe write it up so that it could spread. But I thought the first step was to do a manageable pilot. So that's what we're doing in January.
Wow. It's just so exciting.
Yeah.
So how do you feel having seen this brainchild come to fruition? You're holding the book in your hands. I mean, I know that feeling of writing something and then having that finished product in your hand. And I know you do too with your first book. Is it different this time? Is the feeling that you have having completed this step of this project different?
I think it might be. You just used the word completed. I do feel sort of complete. I have 3 more books planned. I even have the covers designed for this to be a series,
Yeah.
but I have this feeling that it's complete having one. I didn't know I was going to feel this way, but now that it's done, that there's one for adults and one for kids, and I almost like sort of don't want to muddy it up.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do an online course for parents and educators to walk them through the why and how
Mm-hmm.
of using this book with their kids. So I know I'm going to do that, and we'll see what bubbles up.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah,
Just what we were talking about before we even started
that's right.
recording was let this
Yeah.
happen.
There's something so wonderful about it. It can be, and this is going to sound woo woo, but it can be organic. And there's something
Yes.
about that. Like I'm following it instead of, how did you say it earlier? You said something instead of making it.
Yeah, let it happen instead of make it
Yeah.
happen. Let it happen.
Yeah. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm, I'm clear that I will be contributing to the best of my ability till my dying breath.
Yes.
I have no idea what ways in which I'll be doing that.
Yes. Yeah, I used to love to listen. Well, I still love to listen to Jeannie Robertson. She was a speaker that was so funny. She was a comedian, but she spoke and she gave personal development from the stage, and she did it through humor, and she was hysterical. And I loved going and hearing her speak. And I actually heard her speak at a National Speakers Association in the summer of 2021.
Mm.
And I remember it was in Vegas, and I actually ran into her in the casino pulling her suitcase to meet her entourage to take her to the airport, and she was struggling a little bit, and so I just ran up and said, "Oh my gosh, I just heard you speak. Can I take your suitcase for you and chat with you?" Which we did. And I was speaking with my husband that night, and I said, "I want to be like Jeannie Robertson. Like I want to still be on stage speaking when I am." And she was in her late 80s, I believe, at the time. I just want to keep going. And within, I think maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, she passed away from
Huh.
that time when I met her. And I still say to my husband, I just want to keep going
Right.
until I'm not going anymore. I don't want to
Yeah.
stop. I just want to keep going because as long as there's breath in me, I have value. I have something to offer. And I love that you feel the same way because we live in a society that almost wants us to quit when we are 55 or 60 or 65. Pick your date, you're done.
Right.
And I've never understood that mindset. Like, why would we do that?
Yeah.
We stop.
Lots of times, like people will say to me that they want to like find meaning and purpose or something. And like that's such a buzz thing.
Mhm.
And what I suggest is that you don't really have to look far for it, and you don't have to make it up the way you don't have to make it happen.
Yeah.
What you really need to do is to be quiet enough on the inside that you can hear it.
Yeah.
It's like it's not out there. Like you pay some money for somebody to help you find it out there.
Yeah.
It's in here.
Yes.
It's in your heart. It's in your mind, your body, your soul, however you like to think about that. And if it's not so noisy in there, which it is for a lot of us, but
Yes.
when the quieter you get, the more you have, like, again, this is woo woo too, but like there's this inner guidance. Honest to God, it's really
Oh,
there.
absolutely
Right?
it is.
Right?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it's
Yes.
easier than people think.
Yes.
They just have to like settle down on the inside.
Yes. I was speaking with a client last week who was just really struggling, and I asked her, what are you doing for the rest of the day?" And she said, "I have no plans, nothing to do, nothing, nowhere to go." I said, "All right, I want you to grab a journal and just start writing." "What do you want me to write about?" "I don't know. Whatever is in your brain, just let it all out on paper, because the answer that you're looking for is inside of you.
Yeah,
And right
good.
now, you have so many layers. It's like trying to get all the winter clothes off. You come in from playing in the snow and you start ripping off layers, or an onion. That's the one people normally use. But you got to
Mhm,
rip off all those layers before you get to the core.
mhm.
And that's what I want you to do. I want you to just let it all out, because what you're seeking for is not out there. It's in here. And you got to
Totally.
just got to let it out.
I
Yeah.
told you that I had this life-threatening illness a
Yeah.
while back, and people would say to me, "It made you so strong." And I would say, "That's really sweet of you to say, but I don't really see it like that." What I see is that we all have that strength within us.
Yeah.
We don't know it until we need to use it.
That's right.
But it isn't like it made me anything. It was
Yes.
that we already are,
Yes.
and it gets manifested or it doesn't,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
And as you and I were talking, it's too bad that sometimes it takes something like that for it to come to life and into our awareness that that's part of our constitution. But
Yeah.
I do believe that's in all of us,
I do too.
and it's a matter of accessing it and honoring it
Yes.
and appreciating it.
Yes.
You know?
And helping young people find that, as you're doing through this book, is so powerful.
Yeah,
I wish, I mean, if I could turn back the clock and change anything, that would be it. That would definitely be it. And my dad was a graduate of the Dale Carnegie School, and I still
wow,
have his pencil. It's
that's
always
amazing.
right on my desk. My mom gave it to me when she moved in with us, and I couldn't believe she still had it. Um, and so I wish I had this training. I think looking back, I
You
did
did.
have a lot of it. My dad he just was amazing. The people who came through his line when he died and were saying, and he talked to me and he coached me, and I was like, my dad did that? I think I had a lot of that without realizing that I
Oh,
had that.
yeah.
Uh,
Um,
yeah.
what did he do for his primary work?
He was a musician.
He was what?
He was a musician. My dad was. He owned a music store, but he traveled and played. He played trombone, and he traveled literally all over the world.
How do you think he used the Dale Carnegie?
He used it in building his life and in going after his dreams to start his own music business. He worked in a music store, but then he did his own. He started his own music store, which had
Uh-huh.
always been his dream. So definitely in sales, he used that training.
Oh, sales, right.
He was a great salesperson. I used to ask him all the time, "How do you sell these instruments?" That was part of his music store. And he was like, "I never sold an instrument in my life, honey." Like, Dad, I help you clean all of those instruments. I know you're selling them. And he's, "No, I sell the symphony. I sell the experience of a symphony. I've never sold an instrument in my life." That impacted me. So I did have that kind of training.
That
It
would make a great talk.
it would, wouldn't it? He sold
Yeah.
a symphony.
Yeah. That's a wonderful, wonderful metaphor. And yeah.
A lot of what I speak about comes from my dad and my mom. I hit the jackpot when it comes to parents, for sure. And I don't take that lightly either. That's a
Yeah.
great responsibility. That means I get to share it, and I need to share it. But I did have some of that training, some of that what you're bringing in this book, but I didn't realize it. I wish that I really knew what was what I was learning and why.
And I'm going to ask you this because I'm sort of guessing. Did you feel that there were like minds of your peers who were your age, whose heads were where yours was?
No,
Yeah,
no, not
I
at
would
all.
have
I
said
mean,
not.
looking back, I just didn't realize it then, but now, I mean, looking back, no. And I see it. I I am maybe this is just because I'm almost 60. I really appreciate my life more now that I'm older than I did when I was actually walking through those stages. But I learned I learned at a very young age how to navigate conflict resolution and how to communicate. And I didn't realize I was learning all that. But my mom and dad didn't like swoop in and save the day. They gave us skills, and we walked through our trials ourselves. And
Yeah,
they were there to shore us up, but they didn't solve our problems. That was up to us.
that's great.
Yeah. Yes. And I'm so thankful that you are out there doing this work, because I realize now that most kids do not have that. They don't have that. They didn't have that then, and they don't have it now.
Well,
And
the parents are so, um, not all, of course, but some are so driven that even though they're wonderful people and they love their children and they mean well by them, I can give you an example of a client of mine who worked for a large government agency, and she traveled a lot.
yeah.
And she said every time she left, her son would have a meltdown. And it was so unpleasant and nearly impossible to get out of the door.
Wow.
And what she would do is she would talk logic to him. She would go left brain with him. And she would say, and again, this is a very smart woman who loves her kid to death and means well and all of that. But she said what sounds very reasonable. She said, "Oh, honey, you know that I go and I always come back, and daddy's going to be here.
Mhm.
And you know how much fun daddy is, and it's all going to be fine." And I don't know if she brings him a present or not. Maybe she does. Maybe she said that. Who knows? But it was along those lines.
Yes.
And she said, and he would just continue to wail.
Oh.
And I said, okay, let's try this and see what happens. So the idea, and this is very consistent with Dan Siegel's whole brain child.
Yes.
Yeah. So the idea is, instead of going left brain to the child's right brain, you go right brain to right brain before you can then go left together.
Mm.
So what she tried was to say to him, and I'm laughing because it has like a little bit of a funny ending. She would say to him, "I know, I'm going away again. You hate when I go away. It's going to make you really upset. Why don't you tell me, And the kid would tell her how he felt, and she'd repeat it back. Repeating back is something that feels very awkward, maybe, but it's a really powerful thing to do. And so she'd repeat it back. So it really sunk in how he was being heard and accepted. And she's not trying to fix anything. And it got to the point where she told me he was saying to her, "All right, go already. Like, go, go, go. I had enough of it. Get out." She wanted to play with daddy. They had the whole thing planned.
Yep. Yep.
So the idea was, instead of trying to talk people out of their feelings, talk little ones out of their feelings, to first, just what the book tells the kid to do, the parent, first thing you do is acknowledge those feelings.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, that kid can't hear a word you're saying anyway, right? Because
Yes.
they're too busy freaking out. So yeah.
I love this. This is incredible work you're doing. I'm always so proud of you. It's always so good to connect.
Oh, thank you.
Our
I love you
time
too.
is gone. So thank you. our time has gone way too fast. I'm like, how I just looked up to the clock. I was like, how did that do that? How did that do that? So, all right. So we have to hear then. One, we'll need you to come back after the beta group in January so we can hear how it went.
Okay.
We're going to need an
Love
update.
to.
Okay. And then we need to know about your Pow Pow shoes today.
So do you want me to take it off and hold it
Oh,
up?
yeah. Because I mean, the people who are watching are going to want to see. We'll describe them to the listeners.
Okay, y'all. I've done this before with Carrie, and the last time I wore a drop dead gorgeous pair of red heels.
Yes.
And I almost put them, I still have them. I almost put them back on, but it got really cold here in DC.
I love these. These are, for those of you listening, these are black, fluffy slippers.
Uggs. They're Uggs.
Uggs. Oh, they look
These
amazing.
are my new Uggs. I wore my other ones out so bad I couldn't even wear them anymore.
I love it.
There's nothing like them, right?
No, I have Uggs that I put on every single morning when I take these two little urchins outside to use the potty. The Uggs go on my feet before I go outside.
Well, what makes these Pow Pow is they're platform Uggs. So, right? So that makes them qualify. Yeah.
They qualified just because you brought them.
Oh, okay. All right.
What's a writing prompt that we can give our listeners?
What's a writing prompt?
A writing prompt, something to get them writing. We've talked about writing today, so.
Okay. So I have this concept that I like that I learned in my 25 years of studying Advaita Vedanta, believe it or not, pre-Hindu tradition, which is fundamental, by the way, in all the work that I do. I don't talk about it from like the scriptures or anything, but the concepts are just really strong and good. And one of them is good company. And I always like to end with it because for some reason it doesn't come up in the conversation, and yet it's so amazing. All right, so good company is not just the people in our lives that we as adults get to select more than we could as kids, but it's also the music we listen to, the food we eat, everything that enters into our life, that we be as selective as we possibly can so that we invite and include the highest quality available to us. But the most important one, and that's the ATM way from the book, is the quality, the company of the thoughts in our head.
Yes.
So if we want to turn that into a writing prompt, we could ask someone, what do you think is the quality? Write about the quality of the thoughts in your head. If people started paying attention, everything is all about attention anyway. But if people start putting more attention on the quality of the thoughts in their head, I think they would notice an uplifting. And if everyone did it, oh my God, the world would be a much better place.
Oh, so much. That's
Right.
wonderful. Yes. And how can we find you, Madelaine? I will tag your website. Is there any place else that you like people to find you, follow you?
Actually, I on purpose put everything in the same place. It's all on my website. So my social media is on my website. The Power Breathe is free. It's a PDF, so people can download that. That I always like to say that's your best friend forever. Everybody do that. Anywhere, anytime, for any reason. Everybody has to breathe anyway, so nobody even knows you're doing the Power Breathe. So that there are hundreds of free blog posts there. And I also offer a free strategy session if anybody wants to dig a little deeper in a more personal way. There's that.
So MadeleineWeiss.com, and I will link that underneath the podcast so we can find you easier. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
Amazing. And we will see you again in January, February. We'll get you back here and we'll talk about your beta. Okay.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.